Our Revival from the Dead and Entry into Eternal Life. Section 445. When someone's body can no longer perform its functions in the natural world in response to the thoughts and affections of its spirit, which it derives from the spiritual world, then we say that the individual has died. This happens when the lungs' breathing and the heart's systolic motion have ceased. The person, though, has not died at all. We are only separated from the physical nature that was useful to us in the world. The essential person is actually still alive. I say that the essential person is still alive because we are not people because of our bodies, but because of our spirits. After all, it is the spirit within us that thinks, and thought and affection together make us the people we are. We can see, then, that when we die, we simply move from one world into another. This is why, in the inner meaning of the word, death means resurrection and a continuation of life. Section 446. The deepest communication of our spirit is with our breathing and our heartbeat. Thought connects with our breathing, and affection, an attribute of love, with our heart. Consequently, when these two motions in the body cease, there is an immediate separation. It is these two motions, the respiratory motion of the lungs and the systolic motion of the heart, that are essential ties. Once they are severed, the spirit is left to itself, and the body, being now without the life of its spirit, cools and decays. The reason the deepest communication of our spirit is with our breathing and our heart is that all our vital processes depend on these, not only in a general way, but in every specific. Section 447. After this separation, our spirit stays in the body briefly, but not after the complete stoppage of the heart, which varies depending on the cause of death. In some cases, the motion of the heart continues for quite a while, and in others it does not. The moment it does stop, we are awakened, but this is done by the Lord alone. Being awakened means having our spirit led out of our body and into the spiritual world, which is commonly called resurrection. The reason our spirit is not separated from our body until the motion of the heart has stopped is that the heart answers to affection, an attribute of love, which is our essential life, since all of us derive our vital warmth from love. Consequently, as long as this union lasts, there is a responsiveness, and therefore the life of the spirit is still in the body. Section 448. I have not only been told how the awakening happens, I have been shown by first-hand experience. The actual experience happened to me so that I could have a full knowledge of how it occurs. Section 449. I was brought into a state in which my physical senses were inoperative, very much then like the state of people who are dying. However, my deeper life and thought remained intact, so that I could perceive and retain what was happening to me, and what does happen to people who are being awakened from death. I noticed that my physical breathing was almost suspended, with a deeper breathing, a breathing of the spirit, continuing along with a very slight and silent physical one. At first, then, a connection was established between my heartbeat and the heavenly kingdom, because that kingdom corresponds to the human heart. I also saw angels from that kingdom, some at a distance, but two sitting close to my head. The effect was to take away all my own affection, but to leave me in possession of thought and perception. Section 449, subsection 2. I remained in this state for several hours. Then the spirits who were around me gradually drew away, thinking that I was dead. I sensed a sweet odor like that of an embalmed body, for when heavenly angels are present, anything having to do with a corpse smells sweet. When spirits sense this, they cannot come near. This is also how evil spirits are kept away from our spirit when we are being admitted into eternal life. The angels who were sitting beside my head were silent, simply sharing their thoughts with mine. When these are accepted by the deceased, the angels know that the person's spirit is ready to be led out of the body. They accomplish this sharing of thoughts by looking into my face. This is actually how thoughts are shared in heaven. Section 449, subsection 3. Since I had been left in possession of thought and perception so that I could learn and remember how awakening happens, I noticed that at first the angels were checking to see whether my thoughts were like those of dying individuals, who are normally thinking about eternal life. They wanted to keep my mind in these thoughts. I was later told that as the body is breathing its last, our spirit is kept in its final thought until eventually it comes back to the thoughts that flowed from our basic or ruling affection in the world. Especially, I was enabled to perceive and even to feel that there was a pull, a kind of drawing out of the deeper levels of my mind and therefore of my spirit from my body. And I was told that this was being done by the Lord and is what brings about our resurrection. Section 450. When heavenly angels are with people who have been awakened, they do not leave them, because they love everyone. But some spirits are simply unable to be in the company of heavenly angels very long and want them to leave. When this happens, angels from the Lord's spiritual kingdom arrive, through whom we are granted the use of light, since before this we could not see anything, but could only think. I was also shown how this is done. It seemed as though the angels rolled back a covering from my left eye toward the center of my nose, so that my eye was opened and able to see. To the spirit, it seems as though this were actually happening, but it is only apparently so. As this covering seemed to be rolled back, I could see a kind of clear but dim light, like the light we see through our eyelids when we are first waking up. It seemed to me as though this clear, dim light had a heavenly color to it, but I was later told that this varies. After that, it felt as though something were being rolled gently off my face, and once this was done, I had access to spiritual thought. This rolling something off the face is an appearance, for it represents the fact that we are moving from natural thinking to spiritual thinking. Angels take the greatest care to shield the awakening person from any concept that does not taste of love. Then they tell the individual that he or she is a spirit. After the spiritual angels have given us the use of light, they do everything for us as newly arrived spirits that we could ever wish in that state. They tell us, at least to the extent that we can grasp it, about the realities of the other life. However, if our nature is such that we do not want to be taught, then once we are awakened, we want to get out of the company of angels. Still, the angels do not leave us, but we do leave them. Angels really do love everyone. They want nothing more than to help people, to teach them, to lead them into heaven. This is their highest joy. When spirits leave the company of angels, they are welcomed by the good spirits who are accompanying them and who also do all they can for them. However, if they had led the kind of life in the world that makes it impossible for them to be in the company of good people, then they want to get away from these as well. This happens as long and as many times as necessary until they find the company of people their earthly life has fitted them for. Here they find their life, and remarkable as it may sound, they then lead the same kind of life they had led in the world. Section 451. This first stage of our life after death does not last more than a few days, though. In the following pages I will be describing how we are then brought from one state into another until finally we arrive either in heaven or in hell. This, too, is something I have been allowed to learn from a great deal of experience. Section 452. I have talked with some people on the third day after their death, when the events described in sections 449 and 450 have been completed. I talked with 3 whom I had known in the world, and told them that their funeral services were now being planned so that their bodies could be buried. When they heard me say that it was so that they could be buried, they were struck with a kind of bewilderment. They said that they were alive, and that people were burying what had been useful to them in the world. Later on, they were utterly amazed at the fact that while they had been living in their bodies, they had not believed in this kind of life after death, and particularly that this was the case for almost everyone in the church. Some people, during their earthly lives, have not believed in any life of the soul after the life of the body. When they discover that they are alive, they are profoundly embarrassed. However, people who have convinced themselves of this join up with others of like mind and move away from people who have lived in faith. Most of them link up with some hellish community because such people reject the divine and have no use for truths of the Church. In fact, to the extent that we convince ourselves in our opposition to the ideal of the eternal life of the soul, we also convince ourselves in opposition to the realities of heaven and the Church.